The two Amazon procurement nerds are back. We are recording actually on a Wednesday. It's kind of gross and overcast here in Danville. I don't know. Oakland, is it kind of the same? Yucky?
It's freezing. It's also Thursday.
Oh my gosh, Thursday. I said the wrong day. We've got a lot going on at work, so my days are all running together.
Yeah, well, it's cold and rainy or spring drizzly here in Oakland, so I have the heat on because I'm absolutely freezing.
I know I've got slippers and I call it my Lux Leisure outfit on today. So we talked about French fries a couple weeks ago. So now I feel like food's on the mind. And today we are going to talk about pizza. And this topic I'm really, really excited about because this is something very near and dear to my heart around the power of marketing and how marketing can actually make or break a company. And so the idea for this episode actually came, there's an Instagram, I don't even know what we call it, channel account. It's called Visionary Minds. And they post kind of influential, kind of uplifting type things. And they recently did a post telling the Domino's story. So that's kind of give them credit and shout out to the inspiration. And I think this ties nicely into not only the power of marketing, but product innovation and supply chain. And then I know we want to throw some Pizza Hut in the mix as well. Because Domino's,
all about pizza today.
And Domino's and Pizza Hut were head-to-head competitors, and one of them has far surpassed the other, which I think is interesting. So Domino's, so I'll kind of speak to, I'll kind of walk through the story a little bit. So this was in the mid 2000s, and they had a whole campaign. And Dr. Elouise, I don't personally remember these unless I look them up, but they had this promise. It was called 30 minutes or free. So if the pizza wasn't ready in 30 minutes upon placing your order, you got it free. So that was kind of their whole campaign. So what does that mean? That they were focused on speed. So that was like their whole go-to-market motion, fast, fast, fast. The problem was quality suffered. So they were turning out these pizzas, but as we'll come to learn, the quality was not so good. And I know that there used to be a joke in my group that it was like eating cardboard, right? If you had Domino's.
Everybody says that. Everybody says that.
Yeah. So there was this massive, brand reputation challenge around them having crappy pizza. Their stock plummeted at one point. I think it was like $19 a share to something like $261 a share. So major issue. Sales were declining 7 times faster than the industry average. And this one is kind of mind-blowing to me. In blind test taste, they were ranked last, even worse than Chuck E. Cheese pizza. Right? Which is not even... which is technically a gaming company that just has also pizza that tastes like cardboard, but they were ranked worse than Chuck E. Cheese in these tests. So, and then Domino's was a franchise. So a lot of their locations were franchise operated, and those are business owners, and this is their livelihood. And they were closing lots of stores because the franchisees were losing money. And then, I don't know if you remember this going viral, but they had 2 employees that were filming themselves doing some disgusting things to a customer's food.
Allegedly.
Yes, allegedly, right? We don't know if the videos are true, but the footage of them doing these acts, which again, we don't know if they were manipulated or not, but they went viral, of course, right? And so the media just ate it up and was all out to get Domino's. They were absolutely ruthless. And what happened? They lost customers, right? People see this and they're like, peace out.
Well, and the 2 employees later said, and who knows if they said it was all staged, but the damage was done, whether or not it was staged or not.
Yeah. So what happened was, I mean, Domino's was in, I would call it dire straits. Like their company was on the verge of, bankruptcy or having to sell, or they weren't going to make it. So their chief marketing officer went into this board meeting, which was like probably, you dread these board meetings where everything's in the red. And his idea to the board, I mean, this seems just so obvious and basic when I say it, but he said, what if we just tell the truth? And he wasn't meaning just the video with the two employees that went viral, but he was like about everything, including our horrible pizza, that the cardboard is like, the crust is like cardboard, and their sauce, which is more like ketchup and not really tomato. And that was his idea. And that was a huge contemplation that the board had to make, because things were bad, but it could also backfire and, completely blow up. But they decided to go for it. That was the strategy they decided to partake. So what they did was they aired unscripted focus groups brutally criticizing their pizza on national TV, which is, again, very risky to have unedited conversations there about people ripping your product apart. And the CEO, at the end of it, after they aired this, he looked right into the camera. And if you haven't watched it, I would recommend Googling and watching it, and says, our pizza needs to change. The point of that, the marketing play there, is admitting failure, that they messed up, that their priorities pivoted from quality to speed, and that was the wrong move to make. So they turned their whole reinvention into something that they shared publicly. They literally documented and aired all of this, often in very real time and very unscripted. And some of the things that they documented, that they started testing, were 10 different crust types, 15 different sauces, and dozens of cheese combinations. And again, all of this was out in the open. They weren't like hiding behind the scenes. If there was an issue, if there's concerns, they shared all of it. And they tracked down their harshest critics. And these were people who had like publicly bashed them, whether it's in written comment or video. And each confrontation was filmed and aired. And they said things like, you said our crust tastes like cardboard. We want you to help us fix this. And the play here, again, this was a very new concept for being so open and vulnerable about a product sucking. So they reimagined their entire recipe. Some of the things that came out were their garlic herb crust with actually a real flavor. They had a new sauce. And then new cheese, they had a proprietary blend of provolone and mozzarella. And then they redesigned their delivery boxes. I don't know if you remember them, but they just were kind of typical packaging. But the new ones that they have are re-engineered to specifically lock in the heat so the pizza stays warmer. They retained over 100,000 employees and implemented new quality check systems. They revamped over 5,000 stores. And here for us, they rebuilt their entire supply chain from scratch, which is a very, very big undertaking. But when you're completely re-innovating and changing your product, obviously your supply chain needs to change to be able to support that. So what happened? Their sales started doing well. They were 14.3% increases in Q4 of 2009. Their stock doubled in just 6 months. Market share exploded from 9 to 15%. And in the restaurant and the fast food space. It's a very, very crowded market. And then customer satisfaction ratings were up to 60% when they were just like terrible before. But the real kind of tie-in that I think is really innovative and unique is that they pivoted to becoming a tech company that sold pizza. So instead of just being another fast service, quick service, fast casual, fast food restaurant, they actually said, we see more value and money in the tech piece, and the byproduct is actually going to be the pizza. So they call it, and I don't know, Dr. Elouise, if you have any more intel on this, but they call it DOM, and it's an AI system that processes all their pizza orders. And what it does is it creates, or it has real-time delivery tracking. And then they also launched autonomous delivery robots. So what this means is they allow you as the customer to actually look and track and monitor the status of your pizza baking. So what is that? What did that do for them from 2009 to 2019? So 10 years, their stock rose 5,000%. Digital sales were zero. They didn't even have online sales, to 65% of their business in 10 years. And their revenue went from 1.5 to $3.6 billion. On top of all of that, their profit margins doubled. So this was a huge shift in their go-to-market strategy and in embracing transparency and completely reimagining your supply chain. So love, love, love this, because I think marketing played a really vital role in saving and revamping the company.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. I think just from a marketing point of view, Domino's has some iconic imagery, and certainly the 30 minutes or less, delivered 30 minutes or less. And I remember there was avoid the Noid, and the Noid was this little creature that would get into your pizzas and make them cold, and also they had an issue. There was a couple high profile accidents where Domino's drivers were trying to get there fast, and one was a fatality, and another was a driver hit a woman crossing the street. So there was also a pullback from that. Interestingly enough, another company we're familiar with, Amazon, has run into similar problems where their drivers are pushing harder, faster throughout the day. And so there's been some really devastating accidents there. So speed kind of is an interesting thing. Total random sidebar, but everybody knows I'm a military historian, and one of the things I've studied over the years is nuclear weapons. And if you go to visit the Minuteman Museum in South Dakota, there's one of the blast doors. This was painted during the Cold War, but one of the blast doors is it's these like 3-foot thick metal doors, but they have it painted, and it's a sort of a dark humor kind of thing where it says on the door, I'll post a picture of this or send a picture because I have it. It's worldwide delivery in 30 minutes or less, or your next one is free.
So it's got the Domino's call out.
Yeah, exactly. On a nuclear missile, or on the blast door of a nuclear missile silo, which I just always thought was hilarious. But that's how embedded it was. And even when I was in college, I remember I had a little plastic Noid. So anyway, so yeah, it's and I think it's important to talk about how I want to get into the logistics here, but Pizza Hut was the pizza place in the 80s and 90s. And so we're now getting into my childhood, and I don't know how much of this might really show our age difference, where in the 80s and 90s, you would have big celebrations at Pizza Hut. It was an in-person place. They had fresh ingredients. They would they had a salad bar. They were known for salad bars and having video games. And I remember having, going to birthday parties and whatever at Pizza Hut.
I remember where I grew up in Chico, and
Yeah.
there were lots of like sporting team events.
Yes. Yes.
Like your soccer team has like a parent night or some sort of like celebration. So that's how I think of it, as like sporting events, like parties.
Yeah, exactly. And so in the 80s and 90s, Pizza Hut was the place to go. And they would have a salad bar with fresh ingredients, and they would cut a lot, and they would make the dough. I forget exactly what the mechanics were back in the day, but they would, they'd make the dough and cut the ingredients fresh at Pizza Hut. And Pizza Hut, the one thing they didn't do was delivery. And Domino's established a foothold in the 90s by doing delivery. And then as you get into the 2000s, Pizza Hut's going down and Domino's is on the rise. And so Pizza Hut has struggled and still struggles to this day from that. And they now do delivery, but again, as we'll get into some of the details of the logistics, it's nowhere near the efficiency that Domino's is.
Yeah, and I will say, so in my marketing procurement days, my team and I actually serviced the Yum Brands accounts. So that was Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, and KFC. So I have spent many of hours working with Pizza Hut franchisees and looking at marketing materials and print materials for the Pizza Hut brand. And I think one of the things that stands out to me is they haven't figured out how to become cool and hip with the new generation.
Yeah. It's very, very much nostalgic for those of us that were Gen Xers.
But it's kind of like not cool, kind of dark and gringy, and you just don't think about, this is going to be awesome, I want to go there. And so that's a whole thing that ties back to branding and marketing, which Domino's figured out how to reinvent themselves. And I think Pizza Hut has not cracked that code.
Yeah. And I mean, again, for context, in the 70s and 80s, things were very dark and dingy, and you didn't have these big, massive, bright lights that have come to define strip malls here in the US over the last 20 plus years. So like when you say that, it's like, yeah, but everything was like that back then. But for sure, it's yeah.
And then when we get in, I don't know as much about the background in regards to the Domino's supply chain overhaul, but I do know from my research that they invested heavily in technology. And that was the big, as they become a tech company, they incorporated that into their supply chain. So they wanted to automate, be very efficient with forecasting and data and analytics, and focus on higher quality ingredients, but still being able to provide that at a low cost.
Yeah, so I did some research into this, and so I'll walk through all the things, but and I also compared it to Pizza Hut, which I think is an interesting sort of case study between the two. So Domino's is independently owned still, whereas, as you said, Pizza Hut is owned by Yum Brands, a multinational food company. And Domino's is vertically integrated, and they do their ingredients at centralized supply chain centers, and it's very close to just in time, so that like their dough is not frozen. Mm-hmm. They essentially produce it, and then they do when it proves, or I've watched too much baking shows, so I don't even know what the American term is for it, but the dough proves where the yeast grows and or ferments or whatever it does. So they slow that process down. Whereas if you froze it, I think it disrupts the whole process for the dough. So they they slow it down so that it proves slower, and then they're able to then refrigerate it and put it out to their stores, and they have this continuous delivery mechanism so that it's all the ingredients are fresh, and they don't store a lot on site. And so so Domino's has these I think it's 24 or 34, I can't remember, 34 supply chain centers around that, and they serve various localities. And what they do is, of course, they use predictive AI and predictive analytics and AI to do route optimization. They have a dedicated fleet of for delivering to their from the supply centers to the individual restaurants. Their footprints are smaller, which keeps their rents down, and they and also by doing this, they're very consistent, and so the consistency, the taste consistency is the same. They also run their own delivery service, and so they have their own drivers. And as you mentioned, they're experimenting with robot delivery, robotaxi delivery. But essentially, they have a proprietary tech stack that is everything from the tracker to the point of sale to the GPS for forecasting. Part of what they train their franchisees for in forecasting, and so really to help that just in time, because if you get the forecasting right, then it really helps things in the supply chain. Now, just to compare that, Pizza Hut uses a combination of third parties. Actually, everything, there's going to be a lot of third parties in the Pizza Hut column, because dough is either produced at the store level or third party suppliers. They use various distributors, third party distributors for ingredients, resupply. They use DoorDash and Uber Eats for delivery to the customer. They have a fragmented digital ecosystem. Inventory management varies by location and franchisee. They still have, they've been closing their in-store and moving to the more to-go, order to go or delivery. So it's a little bit of a mixed model.
In my mind, it screams old school versus like relevant and hip.
Totally. And I'll just make one other point, and then I'll pause so we can bat this back or forth a little bit. But the other thing, and there's a great video that I watched, is Domino's is now changing they're automating their supply chain centers. So the dough production, all the movements within the supply chain center they're using robots, and those robots and redesigning of the equipment make the production consistent, fast, and moves in and out of the trucks very quickly, which keeps everything on time and moving. And again, they do route optimization. They deliver at night because parking and traffic are better, et cetera, et cetera. And so they have a finely tuned machine. And so they are actually doing a lot of innovation and automation, but very much in the supply chain, because they still want humans in the stores making the pizza and having a very human-centered customer experience. But they are quick, and they have been quick to adopt robotics in their supply chain centers. And what's also interesting is that they still have some manual ones, but the robots perform much better. So over time, they're upgrading their systems. And just sort of back to the French fry thing, like I think we'll see more of that in food service production. So I did think that was a really sort of cool way or interesting way that they're really flexing on supply chain, but not to like fire a bunch of people, but just to make their operations more consistent, smooth, and efficient.
Yeah, and they would be a really interesting use case sometime for us to talk about the actual use of AI in real life.
Yeah.
I feel like of all the companies that have figured out how to incorporate and use AI, a lot of what you read about is that they have incorporated AI very successfully to reduce and almost get rid of manual tasks and
Yeah.
provide predictive analytics and insights and make recommendations that drive their efficiency. And
Yeah.
there's somebody who has figured it out. And I think a lot of other companies have not yet figured that out.
Yeah. No, exactly. And I think it took the crisis and really good leadership to guide them out of the crisis, as you told the story. And then along the way, again, the using data and AI and route optimization and customer tracking, and they were the first ones to give you the whole tracking of your pizza and when it goes in and when it's coming out, and even going back to your previous sort of experience of print packaging. I mean, the idea that you would take cardboard and have a custom box that traps the heat and keeps it I mean, that's a huge breakthrough, which doesn't seem like it would be any there wouldn't be ripe for innovation. And there you go, you come along with an advanced cardboard box. And like, again, if it's sort of like Apple, you could kind of control elements like these innovative elements because they had first mover advantage.
I'll also say something that stands out to me is that they've also become a manufacturing company. So they're a
Yeah.
tech company, they're a pizza company, and instead of leveraging third parties, they've decided to move to the we're going to do it ourselves model. And they actually own and operate themselves 2 thin crust manufacturing facilities and a vegetable processing center.
Yeah.
So as we see craziness happening in the world with tariffs and people trying to figure out what they're going to do for their supply chains, Domino's is an example of we're going to do it ourselves and we're going to become manufacturing experts and run our own facilities. And it'll be interesting to see if other folks follow, go more towards that model.
Well, and to build on that point, that's how you can keep consistent quality at scale, which it seems like that's one of the things Pizza Hut struggles with because you get inconsistency. But actually, because of all the things you just said, Domino's can keep it consistent. And by the way, because they're so vertically integrated, they can have lower operating costs. And again, as you said, resilient operations when I don't know, trade wars or tariffs or all these, or even during COVID. And so their ability to react to that is much, they're on better footing.
Mhm. So if you work in pizza at all, procurement or supply chain or any form of the industry, drop us a note in the comments.
Or if you just love pizza like we do.
Yeah, we'd love to hear any input or feedback. And
Hey, and I have one more on our way out. I just have to say this because when Sarah and I were talking about doing this episode, I I brought up some memories from because there's things I remember from my growing up days and in the 80s and 90s. And I told Sarah this. Oh, she said, let's do the Domino's episode. And I think, oh, that's great because there's this great jingle that I remember from back in the
oh
day.
yeah, you mentioned this.
But it turns out it was for Pizza Hut. But you have to remember when I grew up, and certainly when I was going to college, there was no internet, no public internet at least. We didn't have cell phones, and you had to look like if you were at a place and you wanted to order pizza, you'd have to open up the yellow pages and try to find the place that's closest to you and call them and direct them to where you are because we didn't have GPS or any of that. And I remember I was helping some friends with a theater production at this small little community center. It wasn't in the middle of nowhere, but it wasn't like we didn't have strip malls everywhere either. And and we didn't have like Yellow Pages or anything. And at the time, and maybe this was a Southern California thing, but the Pizza Hut was running this like jingle and advertising everywhere. You couldn't go anywhere, and they basically took the theme to the Lone Ranger. And maybe we'll put I don't know if I wasn't able. We'll see if I can put this, but basically they sang their number to the Lone Ranger song, so it would go. And I'm not a singer, but I'm still gonna do this because it's just still stuck in my head. It's 492222 492222 492222 for Pizza Hut delivery. And I can still remember that jingle. It's got to be 30 years later. I just like
it's probably one of the only phone numbers you still know.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought that was so brilliant. And other people of my generation still remember it, at least in Southern California, because you were just inundated with it. And I remember, so we were at this little community center, and we were hungry, and we ordered pizza, calling 492222. And I mean, and so I do think, and it is interesting that 30 minutes or less, the 492222, and even when you started this episode by talking about pizza, I desperately want to say pizza, pizza, which is the Little Caesars tagline. So it is interesting how this marketing has just embedded itself into pop culture. So
yeah,
I just had to share that.
It's like when you're a kid and you learn to spell Mississippi and you make it into a song.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I don't think I'll ever forget that jingle. And I mean, the power of that was just, it was just, was that Cars for Kids is the other one that Will and Grace did a sort of a spoof on that. And anyway, I always love the pop culture, especially when we talk about brands, or even like the fire trucks and sort of just how these things play out in pop culture. I find it fascinating. So,
alrighty, that is a wrap for this week. We will be back next Wednesday.